Hello, and welcome to our 6-part series called Navigating Today's Normal, the Connected Mind and Body, produced by the New Canaan Health and Human Service Commission. Think of this series of fall programs offered as kind of like a local hug to help you and your family to get through the pressures of today's COVID-based stresses in your life. My name is Dr. Mia Handler. I am the Director of Psychiatry at Silver Hill Hospital and the appointed Director of Behavioral Health for the town of New Canaan. As your series host, I'm going to provide you perspective and professional linkages with each program to show you how the mind and body must be kept healthy and active, particularly for our senior citizens. Across our community and our country, the COVID-19 pandemic has generated an entirely new world with unique health and financial anxieties and stresses. Before the virus came to this country in early March, only about 18% of adults in the US were affected by anxiety and things linked to it such as loneliness and stress. Today, a mere 6 months later, it's fair to say that nearly every one of our citizens has been impacted by some anxiety and stress. And there's no end in sight for when this is going to end. Therefore, the best strategy for all of us adults, particularly seniors, is to become more educated and informed and engaged in learning about new ways to generate well-being for our family, friends, neighbors, and most importantly, ourselves. Finally, the content provided by each of these programs is meant for your general education on the various elements of maintaining you and your family's well-being during these trying times. Should you have need for medical or mental help, please contact your physician or medical advisors immediately. Of course, you always have the Town of New Canaan's Health and Human Services departments whenever you have questions or the need arises. At the minimum, we can all use a regular virtual hug over the next few months. Please enjoy the program. Welcome to our first episode of Navigating Today's Normal, the Connected Mind and Body. In our initial program, my colleague Molly Norton joins me to address managing stress and anxiety. We are going to tell you the signs and symptoms of everyday stress and anxiety, how to recognize it, when it's time to pause, and techniques to leverage in order to manage this stress and anxiety. As a board-certified psychiatrist and physician, I serve as the Behavioral Health Director for the town of New Canaan, and I'm also the Director of Psychiatry for Silver Hill Hospital, a nationally and internationally renowned nonprofit independent psychiatric hospital known for both its psychiatric inpatient and behavioral rehabilitation practices. Molly Norton is an LMHC in mental health and is the Director of Experience and Engagement at Silver Hill Hospital. She began her career at Silver Hill as a clinician, and before that worked in private practice, where she specialized in cognitive behavioral therapy. Molly and I are both here to talk to you today about anxiety, stress management, loneliness, and what that means both in general as well as in today's world. Molly and I, just as a little bit of background, have worked together for over 7 years, both in clinical roles, and have encountered many people through the years who are dealing with exactly these issues. So it's something that's near and dear to both of our hearts.
We are also office neighbors, so we share the same space every day. We have our masks here, but we are in close proximity all the time. So today we're speaking to you so that you can hear us without our masks.
First, we want to start with just a general overall definition of what we're talking about, and starting with anxiety and stress. What is it? So anxiety is a natural response to a stressor. A stressor can be anything. A stressor could be a thumbtack. A stressor could be something much larger. And what happens when it becomes a problem is if the response is not dampened, then that anxiety can become pervasive and can become something that stays with you a longer period of time, and that can have a lot of downstream consequences. I think what we've both seen in our practices is that anxiety is everywhere. It is the most common mental illness in the United States. About 40 million adults struggle with anxiety disorders, which is about 18% of the population. And I think what the most marked thing about this is that only less than 40%, I think about 37% of people actually get into treatment, which means there are a lot of people out there living with some level of anxiety and are just struggling with it. They have no resources at their hand.
Right, and especially now with COVID and the pandemic, there's probably even more people that are
Absolutely.
not seeking treatment because of the fear of leaving home, of going into a populated space to get treatment. So I imagine those numbers have actually shifted even higher of a percentage at this point.
And I do actually see that there have been more people in this time that have, and the statistics have proven it, that there are more people seeking treatment because of all of these stressors. But there is still a gap that exists there.
So I think it's important to take some time to define anxiety because it can be confusing. Not everyone knows what anxiety is. So we define anxiety as intense, excessive, and persistent worry or fear about everyday situations. So I highlighted everyday situations because there is certain things in life that we should be fearful or anxious about. And there are certain things in life that are normal activities that shouldn't produce the amount of anxiety that sometimes they do.
Give me an example.
So an example would be walking down the street to get a cup of coffee. So that's something that people do every day, right? That's a part of our normal activities. Someone with anxiety might experience that as very threatening, dangerous situation. And they may have symptoms such as elevated heart rate, rapid breathing, sweating, fatigue, appetite loss, sleep disturbances, and ruminating thoughts. Speaking of ruminating thoughts.
Can you explain? Yeah.
Right. So ruminating thoughts or worry. I think worry is something we are all familiar with, worrying about things in the future. So worry is actually a symptom of anxiety. It's part of the whole anxiety puzzle. So they are two separate things, but very much related. I think it would be very hard to find someone who struggles with anxiety that has no worry at all. And then also the physical element of anxiety is the fight or flight response to perceived danger. So when you're having all of these physical symptoms, it's really a natural response that your body is having to real perceived danger, right? So we evolved as humans to become afraid and have a rapid heart rate and sweating and all of that when we come across something dangerous like a bear or something that could harm us, because our bodies need to prepare themselves to act. So in anxiety, which makes it so difficult to deal with, you're having that same very visceral, intense response to a danger that actually isn't something that is going to imminently harm you. Now, this always gets complicated when you're talking about a pandemic because there is an element of real fear and something to actually be worried about. So we'll talk a little bit more later on about how to manage that. What is a normal level of fear? What is an excessive level of fear? And how we manage anxiety in these situations. Another important thing to point out is anxiety is not always harmful. So everybody that's ever lived has had some level of anxiety. Some of it is helpful in the sense that it can motivate us to do things, right? To get up in the morning, to go to work, to prepare for a presentation, to deal with any sort of situation that requires us to kind of get up and go. So it's important to recognize the difference between healthy anxiety and harmful anxiety. And Mia, you could speak to there's a graph.
Yeah, there's like a bell-shaped curve that you can often think about in your mind, that as anxiety increases, your productivity is actually going to increase because it's driving you. But there's a certain point where it peaks, and then after that, any added anxiety is actually going to decrease your productivity. So there is a sweet spot where it's helpful, and then after a certain point where it becomes harmful to whatever you're trying to achieve. Another point that just to tag along to what you were talking about, physiologically what's happening when you have anxiety. You mentioned the fight or flight and stress hormones. Cortisol is our body's largest, most abundant stress hormone. And what that does is when you have this fight or flight response or a state of anxiety, cortisol production goes up. Which is good in that moment. It's what's keeping you safe. But as over time, if that production is constantly upregulated, you have more and more cortisol, that's going to have downstream effects that are negative. That can be increased blood pressure, increased risk of cardiovascular disease, poor blood glucose tolerance. So it can have a lot of other effects to your body's overall functioning.
So then a good question to ask is, how do we get out of the trap, right? So if the physical and mental response is one of, increased cortisol and a need to fight or flee, and that's compounded with lots of worries that are going on cognitively, how do we stop that cycle of anxiety from being so reinforcing? Because what happens is when you have this anxious response, your human reaction is to retreat, get away from whatever is causing the fear, and to sometimes isolate and just avoid, right? Because if I don't deal with it, maybe I won't feel these terrible feelings. And unfortunately, what happens in that is that you are reinforcing the idea, right? The learning that's going on is that I need to retreat or I need to avoid to feel safe. When we know in anxiety treatment that the best thing you can do is to systematically approach your fears, because then a learning process happens where you realize, oh, when I stay in this situation and I wait it out for a little bit, that anxiety is going to come down on its own, and I can actually face that situation. So there's a learning process that happens there. Now, we're also dealing with a very difficult time right now, and it's not always advised to go approaching the fear if it's COVID related, right? We have to tease out what's healthy and advised in that way. But for your regular everyday anxiety, the treatment for it is largely around facing those fears, because that really helps in the long run.
And so to bring that to the next topic, we are going to be talking about COVID-19 and anxiety, which is anxiety in 2020. It's the elephant in the room, right? There's not one person who has not been affected by COVID-19, and to some degree, some level of anxiety. Now, that varies from person to person. No two people will experience it the exact same way. But acknowledging that you are affected by it is helpful, because then that's being aware of your own body's responses and trying to figure out what it is that you're worried about. Worry, again, there's that term. So are you worried about staying alive? That you're worried about your own mortality? Are you worried about the livelihood of those around you? Are you worried about your own financial stability, your job, your ability to pay the bills, and also your sense of what the future holds? When are we going to go back to normal? And one of the things that has kind of been equated with COVID-19 is this almost a sense of grief and loss over our normalcy and not knowing when the new normal is going to start. So I think that's just one of the things to pay attention to now in your own everyday life as we're struggling through this tough period.
And in my experience and practice, the thing that anxiety hates the most, right, is uncertainty. And we have never, I mean, at least in my lifetime, your lifetime, and probably most people's lifetime, we've never been globally so uncertain about what's going to happen next. And I think there's an element of we're all in this together that's helpful, that we're going to take it one day at a time. This will end eventually. But the anxiety and the uncertainty piece is really raging right now, and we have to do everything that we can to just take it one step at a time.
Now, Molly, you have said something to me that has been really important, is talking about where anxiety is centered as far as the past, the present, and the future. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So anxiety tends to be very future-focused. Most of the things that we're anxious about and the anxious response that we have is due to fearing something is going to happen, right? Anxiety usually doesn't live in the past as much. Usually if we're ruminating or worrying about the past, that's more of a depressive train of thought, right? So if you suffer from depression, you tend to more ruminate about things that have already happened, whereas anxiety tends to be very much projected into the future. What's going to happen next? What if this happens? What if that happens? How can I prevent this terrible thing that I think is going to happen from happening? So in practice, we work on managing the thoughts behind that and figuring out a way to safely step forward into behaviors that will help correct that train of thought.
So moving forward, there's this this great way of looking at how to balance the scales, and I think that can help to give us tools to learn how to move forward. So, do you want to start us off just talking a little bit about stress?
Sure. So there is a difference between stress and anxiety, just like there's a difference between worry and anxiety. So where are they different? So stress is definitely, stressors can contribute to anxiety for sure. So here you have a slide where you have a picture of a scale, and on one side you have demands, and on the other side you have resources. Now you can think of demands as stressors, right? So things that take energy, are inherently difficult parts of life, right, that require you to really be present and get things done, and really demands is a perfect way of describing it, because that's what it is. And then on the other side you have resources. So these are things that fill you up, help you relax, give you the tools that you need to manage stress. So we experience stress as people when our demands outweigh our resources. So if you think of it that way, you can solve stress, or you can help reduce your stress by either decreasing the amount of demands that you have or increasing your resources. Now, for any person, that can look different, right? Some of the demands are unavoidable. Right now, COVID-19 is a demand that we cannot get rid of. None of us can get rid of that. But there's many, many other things in life that we may be able to step away from or deal with later, right? So that we can make that balance more even. The caregiver role is a stressor for a lot of people. So whether you're older and taking care of adult children, or you are younger and you have young children, the pandemic and life in general right now, it's affecting those different areas all around and differently. I won't go through all of the different things that are stressors, because I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but resources are things that we can reach out to and use to balance those scales. So therapy is an obvious resource. Yeah. Me and I both know that world very well, and we even recommend that people who are therapists get their own therapy. And that really right now in this time, everyone should be okay with asking for help. I know it's harder for some people than others, but help is out there and it's available, and it can be a major resource for people. Supportive friends, someone to talk to, pick up the phone, make a call to someone who can help you navigate this. Medications, Mia, you can speak a little bit about.
Yeah, there are medications. There are so many medications that are available to combat anxiety and stress and any downstream effects that might have. And this is someone you should be reaching out, or you should be reaching out to your primary care doctor or to a psychiatrist or even a friend or a therapist and saying, I think I need more help. And then let someone who's qualified be able to help you prescribe that. And some of the medications work rapidly if you're having a panic attack. Other medications can take several weeks to work, but long-term can help to reduce that anxiety level.
Right. And we have community resources, which we'll share with you, I think, later in this program. We'll make those available. Exercise, obvious, if you can get outside, get outside. It is, nature is our biggest, bonus right now.
Yeah,
it's something that we can
Engaging,
access.
yeah.
Right. Relaxation, whatever you can do in that realm. Spirituality is very important to a lot of people. That can help, having faith during this time that things will pass. And then just your regular hobbies and activities that you normally enjoy, if you can find a way to do those safely as well.
Yeah. So moving along, wanted to touch upon the topic of loneliness. Loneliness is a huge problem in this country. Our former Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, did a lot of research in this, and there's been research across the country from very large institutions just about the effects that it has when people feel isolated or a lack of connectedness. Loneliness is actually harmful to your body. It's toxic. There have been studies that have been followed over 75 years that have shown that it's toxic to the body. It works the same way stress does on the body through these stress hormones, and it can lead to increased blood pressure. It can lead to cardiovascular disease. It also, this study that was done at Harvard, which you have the reference to here, it shows that the more isolated people are, the less happy they are, and their brain function actually declines, as well as their physical health. in the studies that Vivek Murthy has done and others, it has shown that loneliness can be the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day, and also can take up to 15 years off of your life. So that right there speaks to, do you want your life to be until you're 100 years old or 85? I mean, 15 is a long period of time. So it just speaks to that need for connectedness. And I think one of the really important things is reaching out,
right,
for yourself or for others. And Molly, what are other things that we can do?
So connecting with others is the obvious first thing, right? And that's harder for some people than for others, depending on what situation you're in. Hopefully everyone at least has access to the internet or a phone during this time. Whether or not you can see people in person definitely varies. But finding those people that you can reach out to, hopefully having supportive family members who reach out to you, and really doing everything you can to keep a schedule. And so connecting with other people may be part of that, of keeping a schedule, because when every day starts to feel kind of like the same day over and over again, if you don't have a schedule even written out for yourself, and it could be just simple activities. It could be, 15 minutes for drinking my coffee in the morning and reading the paper. And then from 10 to 11, I'm going to walk around the block near my house. And just really sticking to that, because that helps shape the day. That helps make things different. If you can work other things into the schedule that you haven't done before. In our world, we call that behavioral activation. So a lot of treatment for depression and probably helps with loneliness as well is finding activities that you find pleasurable or that bring you joy that you can schedule into your day depending on the impact that they have. So if you rate your mood on a scale of 1 to 10, and then you engage in an activity such as eating a piece of chocolate, right? Something very simple, and then rate your mood after that. If you notice a big enough shift that you're like, okay, that really helped, that's the type of thing that you want to make sure that you're incorporating into your schedule. So it could be things as big as going to visit someone safely, socially distanced, or it could be something very small like that, because you have to be able to access what's in your environment and you have to make that work for you. Another thing is just finding meaning. We're all in this together, as we said before. This too shall pass. Sometimes people believe that things happen for a reason, and just having the resolve to take it one step at a time and find some sort of meaning in everything that's going on. Staying active is a pretty obvious one, as much as is possible. If you can get outside, walk around inside, access some sort of machine to work out on, anything you can do to keep yourself active. So brain and body are active. And then having gratitude. So another thing that we teach people in anxiety treatment is it really helps to recognize what you do have rather than what you don't have or what you're missing. So an exercise that we do is we'll have people, when they get up in the morning, they'll write in a gratitude journal. So 2 things that I'm grateful for this morning. And it can be very simple things. It could be, I'm grateful for my cup of coffee. And then at the end of the day, before you go to bed, 2 things you're grateful for in your gratitude journal. And there's something about writing it down and putting it out there that really has an impact. So that's something I would highly suggest during this time.
Absolutely. So what else can we do to balance stress and anxiety? This is where things are fun for Molly and myself, because we get to try to introduce ideas to you about other things you can do to engage in your life that bring you to the moment, stress and anxiety, future, in the moment, to really be present and engaged. So, for example, this chart is identifying different activities you can do based on the senses, right? So going through the 5 senses. Let's start with sound. Molly, what is something you like to do involving sound that would help be stress reducing?
Right. So if I'm feeling tense or anxious, I may listen to some calming music. And music is a powerful thing for a lot of people. I wouldn't suggest listening to anything that's too tied to memories from the past or is too heavy if you're feeling anxious or depressed or stressed. Finding something like meditation music or calming jazz or something that's that's low key can be really helpful, and that works for me personally. Really, all of these sense related activities bring you to the present, and I think that's the thing that carries through all of these. So I always like to say to people, it's impossible to be anxious if you're truly in the present. Like if you are actually in this moment right now, you can't be anxious because you can't be thinking about the future. You can't be thinking about the past. You are here right now. So all of these things are very grounding in that way. And practicing mindfulness meditation is a huge helpful thing that you can do during this time also. So Mia, in terms of senses, smell. What is something for you that you can connect with?
Oh, I can connect with smell with being outside and smelling grass, or being by the water and smelling the seawater, or even better yet, coming into the house and smelling food being cooked. And again, being in the present, because that's just, you are just enjoying that in that exact moment. So
I like candles. So if you can't go outside for some reason and you can get something scented, like a scented candle, I like to do my candles based on the season. And there's something really relaxing for me about that. And also essential oils are something that are really popular now, but for good reason, I think, because the different scents can help you feel either invigorated or relaxed. Lavender is a personal favorite of mine. But you can get those pretty much anywhere online or in most health food shops now.
Yeah.
So,
how about the sense of touch?
Massage, which is difficult during COVID. Massage is usually my go-to.
Yeah.
Regular once a month, I'll go get a massage. Right now, that's much harder. Other things that you can do with touch, you can, if you have a pet or something that you can pet, that's helpful. There's a lot of gadgets now these days that you can use as fidget things that actually really help.
Yeah.
When you're
stress ball. I'm at work on it. I'm usually
I do that all day,
holding a
with
stress
putty
ball. Totally.
and stuff.
Yep.
So that's really, you can find really that thing that you have. Mia has this very interesting stress.
It's
what do you call that?
I don't even know. Some child's toy, but
yeah, but that speaks to having something to kind of play with and fidget with is a good sense of touch.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got Steve with us here today, who's representing all of you out there. And Steve, we'd love to have you answer a question for us. What are some of the practical things you can do using our senses of taste and vision in order to get some stress relief?
Mia, that's a terrific question. I know when I'm feeling a bit down or anxious or out of sorts, what I look forward to is just taking a walk through the fields, through the woods, past the ponds, just looking around at nature. It really lifts me up. It improves my mood tremendously, and I know at the end of the walk, without a doubt, I always feel better. And then, almost with as much excitement, I look forward to having a nice cup of tea and a biscuit after that. Very warm and relaxing, which generally sets me in the mood to pick up the phone and call a friend or two that I haven't talked to in a while. See how they're doing. I know these are difficult times, and oftentimes a phone call can really cheer people up. So if I can help make someone's day a little bit better, I'm glad to do it.
Thank you, Steve. I can definitely relate to that as well, and I think many of our viewers can relate to that too, the vision of being in a field and connecting with nature in that way.
What would you say, in your words, is the message we want to send to our viewers?
I think I would say if you were interested by anything you heard today in terms of skills that you can use or things that you can learn to help manage your anxiety, depression, isolation, loneliness, any of those things, there are many, many people out there who have the skill and education to help you one-on-one work through what's going to work for you. So I would just say don't be afraid to seek help. There are helpful people out there who will help you work through this really difficult time.
Which brings up the term of resilience, being able to be in a difficult situation and to be able to come out stronger on the other side. And if you see someone around you who's lonely or someone else around you who is struggling, to reach out to them and talk to them, or if you don't feel comfortable reaching out to them, reach out to someone in the community and see if someone can check in on them, just to make sure people are accessing whatever resources they need. Thank you so much.
Thank you.